The night shift alarm echoed through the massive halls of Federation Starbase Omega. Jake Morrison pulled his worn work jacket tighter as he walked through the corridors filled with aliens from across the galaxy. His steel-toed boots made quiet sounds on the metal floor as he made his way to Hangar Bay 94. At 62 years old, Jake had seen better days. His hair was more gray than brown now, and deep lines marked his weathered face. Oil stains covered his blue coveralls from 15 years of fixing starships. Most people barely noticed him as he passed by. He was just another human worker in a galaxy full of strange beings. The hangar bay stretched out before him like a small city. Hundreds of starships filled the space, from tiny scout vessels to massive cargo haulers. Bright work lights hung from the ceiling, casting long shadows between the ships. The air hummed with the sound of welding torches and power tools. Jake checked his assignment tablet. Tonight he would work on Fighter 7742, a Federation interceptor that had limped back from patrol with engine trouble. The day shift had run basic checks but left the real work for the night crew. That was fine with Jake. He preferred working when the hangar was quieter. He grabbed his toolbox from his locker and walked toward the damaged ship. Along the way, he passed other mechanics starting their shifts. There was Vex, a tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 arms who could work on multiple systems at once. Near the fuel station, 3 crystal beings sparkled under the lights as they discussed repair schedules. Their voices sounded like wind chimes when they talked. None of them said more than a polite greeting to Jake. After 15 years, he was part of the furniture. Reliable but unremarkable, a steady worker who showed up on time and did his job without causing problems. Commander Thex stood near the main control station, his insect-like head turning to watch the night shift begin work. The commander was 8 feet tall with green armor-like skin and compound eyes that missed nothing. He ran the hangar with military precision, and he barely tolerated the human workers who he saw as slow and limited compared to other species. Jake reached Fighter 7742 and set down his toolbox. The ship was a sleek design built for speed and combat. Scorch marks along its hull told the story of a recent battle with pirates. The left engine showed clear signs of overheating, and diagnostic lights blinked red across the control panel. He plugged his tablet into the ship's computer system and watched the data flow across the screen. The official report listed engine failure and power system damage. Estimated repair time was 16 hours using standard procedures. But Jake saw something else in the numbers. The power coupling between the main drive and the weapon systems showed tiny irregularities that the computer had marked as normal. But Jake had seen those patterns before, long ago in a different life. They meant the coupling was about to fail completely. When it did, the ship would lose all power in the middle of a fight. The pilot would be a sitting duck. Jake opened his toolbox and pulled out his personal scanner, an old device he had modified over the years. He ran it over the ship's power systems and confirmed what he suspected. The coupling would fail within 20 flight hours. The computer diagnostic had missed it completely. He could report the problem and wait for the day shift specialist to handle it. That was proper procedure. But Jake had never been one to leave a job half done, especially when lives were at stake. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. The power coupling was buried deep in the ship's engine compartment. Jake had to remove 6 access panels and disconnect dozens of connections just to reach it. His hands moved with practiced skill even in the cramped space. After 40 years of working on machines, his fingers knew their way around any engine. Other mechanics worked on nearby ships, but none paid attention to what Jake was doing. A floating repair drone hovered past, its sensors recording work progress for the shift reports. It logged Jake's activity as routine maintenance and moved on. 3 hours later, Jake had the coupling exposed. The problem was worse than he thought. Microfractures ran through the crystal matrix that channeled power between systems. The part was supposed to last 50,000 flight hours, but this one was failing after only 12,000. Jake had seen this before during the war. Cheap replacement parts that looked good on paper but failed when crews needed them most. He had learned to spot the signs and fix them before they became deadly problems. Working by feel as much as sight, Jake carefully removed the damaged coupling. He had a replacement in his personal parts collection, a high-grade military component he had been saving for just this kind of situation. It cost him 2 weeks of pay, but it would keep the pilot alive. Installing the new coupling took another 2 hours. Jake tested each connection twice, making sure the power flow was clean and stable. The ship's systems came online one by one, all showing green status lights. The engine hummed with smooth power that had been missing before. As Jake cleaned up his tools, he noticed the ship's performance readings were 15% better than factory specifications. The new coupling was handling power more efficiently than the original design, but he made no note of this in his report. He simply marked the work as completed and moved on to his next assignment. Dawn shift workers began arriving as Jake finished his repairs. Commander Thex made his morning inspection, checking work completed during the night. He glanced at Jake's report for Fighter 7742, noted the routine maintenance entry, and approved it without comment. Jake gathered his tools and headed for the locker room. Another night shift was over. Another ship was ready to keep its crew safe. As he walked past the other mechanics starting their day, none of them knew that Jake had just saved a pilot's life with work that went far beyond his job description. In the changing room, Jake hung up his coveralls and pulled on his street clothes. His back ached from hours of crawling through engine compartments, but he felt satisfied with the night's work. Tomorrow he would return and do it all again, fixing problems others missed and asking nothing in return. Jake Morrison walked out into the morning light of the alien sun, invisible among the crowds of Federation workers heading home. Behind him, Fighter 7742 sat ready for its next mission, its pilot unaware that an old mechanic had saved his life while the galaxy slept. The emergency alert system screamed through Hangar Bay 94 at exactly 0800 hours. Jake Morrison had just finished his coffee and was preparing for another quiet night shift when the announcement echoed through the massive space. All personnel to stations. Priority Alpha inspection beginning immediately. General Patricia Hayes arriving for fleet review. Jake nearly dropped his coffee mug. General Hayes was a legend throughout the Federation. She had led the human forces during the Rigel campaign and helped bring peace to 3-star systems. Her tactical genius was studied in military academies across the galaxy. What was she doing at Starbase Omega? The hangar transformed into controlled chaos within minutes. Day shift workers who should have gone home stayed to prepare their stations. Night shift crews arrived early to make sure everything looked perfect. Even the alien mechanic seemed nervous about the inspection. Commander Thex stood near the main entrance, his compound eyes scanning every corner of the hangar. His assistant, a small gray alien named Clicks, held a tablet and checked items off a long list. Work lights were adjusted to eliminate shadows. Tools were arranged in perfect rows. Even the floor was polished until it gleamed. "Morrison," Commander Thex called out, "make sure your work area is clean. No oil stains, no loose tools. The general will see everything." Jake nodded and walked to his assigned section. 3 damaged ships waited for repairs, including a badly hurt assault frigate that had limped back from a pirate attack. The ship's hull was scorched black in several places, and its hyperdrive core showed critical damage on every diagnostic screen. The automated repair systems had already given their verdict. The ship was a total loss. Too much damage, too expensive to fix. It would be stripped for parts and then scrapped. Jake had seen the reports, but something about giving up on the ship bothered him. He ran his personal scanner over the frigate's engine compartment. The readings were bad, but not as bad as the computer claimed. The hyperdrive core was damaged, but not destroyed. With the right approach, it might be salvageable. Jake checked his watch. The inspection would not reach his section for at least 2 hours. He had time to take a closer look. Working quickly, Jake removed the access panels to the hyperdrive system. The core was a beautiful piece of engineering, a crystal matrix that could fold space and allow faster-than-light travel. But 3 of the focusing crystals had cracked during the pirate attack, and the computer had declared the entire system dead. Jake had worked on hyperdrive systems before, back when proper replacement parts were hard to find and crews had to make do with whatever they could salvage. He knew tricks that were not in any official manual, techniques that engineers had forgotten in peacetime. The damaged crystals could not be replaced, but they could be bypassed. Jake began rerouting power through the undamaged sections of the matrix. It was delicate work that required perfect timing and a deep understanding of how the crystals resonated with each other. As he worked, Jake became lost in the familiar rhythm of complex repairs. His hands moved without conscious thought, following patterns he had learned decades ago. The hyperdrive core began to respond. its energy readings slowly climbing from 0 toward operational levels. The weapon systems were another problem. The ship's main guns had been overloaded during the fight, and their power circuits had burned out. The standard fix would require completely replacing the firing mechanisms, work that would take weeks. But Jake saw another solution. Instead of replacing the burned circuits, he could modify the power flow to use backup systems. It would reduce the gun's maximum output by 20%, but the ship would be able to fight again. He was deep in the weapons array when footsteps approached his work area. Jake looked up to see a group of high-ranking officers walking through the hangar. At their center was a woman in a crisp uniform with stars on her collar. General Patricia Hayes had arrived for her inspection. The general was shorter than Jake had expected, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone used to command. Her gray hair was pulled back in a military style, and her sharp eyes missed nothing as she toured the facility. Commander Thex walked beside her, pointing out the hangar's most advanced equipment. Behind them came a parade of alien officers from different Federation worlds. They all seemed eager to impress the famous general. "Our diagnostic systems can analyze any ship in the fleet," Commander Thex was saying. "We maintain a 96% efficiency rating using fully automated procedures." General Hayes nodded politely, but Jake could see her attention was elsewhere. Her eyes swept over the workstations, watching how the mechanics performed their tasks. She was evaluating the people, not just the equipment. The inspection party moved closer to Jake's section. He tried to focus on his work, hoping to blend into the background as he always did. The assault frigate's hyperdrive core was responding better than expected. Another hour of work and he might have it fully operational. "What about this ship?" General Hayes asked, stopping in front of the damaged frigate. The reports listed as a total loss. Commander Thex checked his tablet. "Yes, General. Battle damage from a pirate engagement. The automated systems recommend scrapping it for parts. Too expensive to repair using standard methods." General Hayes walked around the frigate examining the damage. Her trained eye took in the scorch marks and hull breaches. "Looks like she put up a good fight," she said quietly. Jake continued working inside the ship's engine compartment, but he could hear the conversation outside. Part of him wanted to speak up, to explain that the ship could be saved. But he was just a night shift mechanic. His opinion would not matter to people at that level. The general's voice grew closer. "Someone's working on the hyperdrive system." "Probably just salvaging usable parts," Commander Thex replied dismissively. "Morrison is one of our night shift workers. Very reliable for routine tasks." Jake's hands paused over the hyperdrive controls. Through the open access panel, he could see polished boots and uniform pants. The general was standing right outside the ship, looking directly at his work area. "This doesn't look like salvage work," General Hayes said slowly. Her voice carried a note of growing interest. "This looks like someone is actually trying to repair this system." Jake knew he should stop working and acknowledge the officers, but the hyperdrive core was so close to being operational. Just a few more connections and the ship would be able to fly again. His hands moved to complete the power routing sequence. The hyperdrive core hummed to life with a sound like distant thunder. Energy readings jumped from critical to stable in seconds. Jake allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction before remembering where he was. General Hayes was staring at the diagnostic screens with obvious surprise. The readings showed a fully operational hyperdrive system, where moments before there had been nothing but damage reports. "Impressive work," she said quietly. Jake Morrison crawled out from the engine compartment of the assault frigate, his coveralls even more oil-stained than before. He had not expected to find General Patricia Hayes standing beside his work area, studying the diagnostic screens with intense interest. "Impressive work," the general said as Jake straightened up and wiped his hands on a rag. Jake felt his face grow warm with embarrassment. He had been so focused on the repairs that he had forgotten about the inspection. Now the most famous officer in the Federation was looking at his jury-rigged solutions and makeshift fixes. "Just doing my job, General," Jake replied quietly. "She's a good ship. Deserved a second chance." Commander Thex stepped forward, his compound eyes showing clear discomfort. The insectoid officer had not expected one of his night shift workers to attract the general's attention, especially not in a positive way. "General Hayes," Commander Thex said quickly, "this is Jake Morrison, one of our maintenance workers. I apologize if he has disrupted your inspection with unauthorized repairs." But General Hayes ignored the commander's attempt to redirect the conversation. Her eyes remained fixed on the diagnostic screens showing the frigate's restored systems. The hyperdrive core that 3 different AI systems had declared beyond repair was now operating at 94% efficiency. "Where did you learn to work with Altarian hyperdrive cores like that?" she asked Jake directly. Jake paused in cleaning his tools. The question was simple, but something in the general's tone suggested it was more important than it seemed. He looked up at her face and saw sharp intelligence behind her calm expression. "Long time ago, General," he answered carefully. "Different war, different ships, but the principles are the same." The alien officers in the inspection party exchanged glances. Most of them had never fought in a war where proper replacement parts were scarce. They relied on automated systems and factory-fresh components. The idea of improvising repairs with salvaged materials was foreign to them. General Hayes stepped closer to examine Jake's work more carefully. She recognized techniques that had not been used in decades, methods that required both technical knowledge and desperate creativity. These were the kinds of repairs that kept ships fighting when everything else had failed. "You bypassed the damaged crystal matrix and rerouted power through the secondary channels," she observed. "That should not work according to standard engineering principles." Jake shrugged. "Sometimes standard principles don't apply when you're trying to keep people alive. The backup systems can handle the load if you balance the energy flow correctly." The general nodded slowly. She had seen similar improvised solutions during her own military career, but only from the most experienced engineers. This kind of work required years of hands-on experience and an intuitive understanding of how different systems interacted. "What about the weapons array?" she asked, noting the restored power readings on the tactical display. "Main circuits were fried, but the targeting systems were still good," Jake explained. "I rerouted power through the sensor array. Reduces maximum output by about 20%. But the guns will work when needed." Commander Thex's assistant, the small gray alien named Clicks, checked his tablet and spoke up nervously. "Sir, the repair estimate for this vessel was listed at 437 hours using standard procedures. This human has restored primary systems in less than 6 hours." The other alien officers looked skeptical. One of them, a tall being with blue skin and silver hair, stepped forward to examine the work more closely. He ran his own scanner over the hyperdrive system and confirmed the readings. "The repairs appear to be stable," he announced with obvious surprise. "Energy flow is actually more efficient than original specifications." General Hayes continued her examination of Jake's work. She noticed other small improvements he had made while fixing the major damage. Coolant lines had been rerouted for better heat management. Power couplings had been upgraded with higher-grade components. Even the life support systems showed improved efficiency. "You've been making modifications beyond the basic repairs," she observed. Jake looked uncomfortable under all the attention. "Just fixing things that needed fixing. No sense in doing a job halfway." The general smiled slightly. She recognized the attitude of a true craftsman, someone who took pride in work well done regardless of whether anyone noticed. It reminded her of the engineers she had known during her early military service, people who cared more about keeping their crews alive than following regulation procedures. "How long have you been working on Federation ships?" she asked. "About 15 years, Jake replied. "Started here right after I finished my previous job." Something in the way he said previous job caught the general's attention. Most civilian mechanics talked about their work history openly. Jake's careful phrasing suggested he was avoiding details about his past. General Hayes looked at Jake more carefully, studying his face and posture. He was older than most of the hangar workers, probably in his early 60s. His movements showed the confidence of someone with extensive experience, but there was also a watchful quality that reminded her of military veterans. "What kind of work did you do before joining the Federation maintenance crews?" she asked. Jake's hands paused in organizing his tools. The question seemed to make him uncomfortable, and he took a long moment before answering. "Ship engineering," he said finally. "Different organization, different time." The general noticed how Jake avoided giving specific details. In her experience, people who were vague about their military service usually had good reasons. Some veterans preferred not to talk about wars that had cost them friends and comrades. Commander Thex was growing impatient with the extended conversation. He had a schedule to maintain, and spending so much time on one maintenance worker was disrupting his carefully planned inspection route. "General, if we could continue the tour," he suggested. "There are several other areas I wanted to show you." But General Hayes was not ready to move on. Something about Jake Morrison intrigued her, beyond just his exceptional repair skills. She had met many talented engineers during her career, but few who worked with such quiet competence while avoiding recognition. "I'd like to see your maintenance logs for the past year," she told Commander Thax. "Specifically, I want to review the performance records for ships that have been serviced by Mr. Morrison." The alien commander looked confused, but agreed to provide the requested information. Within minutes, Clix had compiled the data on his tablet and handed it to the general. As General Hayes scrolled through the maintenance records, her expression grew more interested. Every ship that Jake had worked on showed performance improvements well above Federation standards. Fuel efficiency was up an average of 18%. System reliability had improved across all categories. Even combat effectiveness ratings were higher for vessels that had received his attention. "These numbers are remarkable," she said, showing the data to her aide, Colonel Davis. "It's like having an entire engineering team working on each ship." Jake continued cleaning his tools, trying to ignore the growing attention from the inspection party. He had always preferred to work quietly and avoid notice. Now he found himself at the center of a discussion that was making him increasingly uncomfortable. "Mr. Morrison," General Hayes said, turning back to him, "I think we need to talk more about your background." Jake Morrison felt the weight of General Hayes's attention like a physical thing. The inspection party had grown larger as word spread through the hangar about the impossible repairs. Even aliens from other work shifts had found excuses to wander closer and observe the conversation. "General, I appreciate the interest," Jake said carefully, "but I'm just a maintenance worker. Nothing special about fixing ships that need fixing." But General Hayes was not convinced. She had spent too many years in military service to miss the signs. Jake's posture, his way of assessing problems, even his choice of words suggested training far beyond civilian technical school. "Your repair techniques are not standard Federation methods," she observed. "They're older, more creative. The kind of solutions that come from working under extreme conditions with limited resources." Jake nodded slowly. "You learn to make do with what's available. Sometimes the book answers don't work when lives are on the line." The phrase "lives are on the line" resonated with everyone present. It was not the kind of language civilian mechanics typically used. It spoke of combat experience, of understanding that technical failures could mean death for ship crews. Colonel Davis, the general's aide, stepped closer to examine the frigate's restored systems. He was a technical specialist himself and could appreciate the complexity of what Jake had accomplished. "Sir, the power routing alone should have taken a team of engineers several days to calculate," he reported to the general. "This appears to have been done by intuition and experience." Jake reached for a specialized tool that had rolled under the ship's landing strut. As he stretched to retrieve it, his sleeve rode up his forearm, revealing a section of faded tattoo that he normally kept hidden. General Hayes's breath caught in her throat. The partial image showed the edge of a stylized eagle, with lightning bolts clutched in its talons. Around the eagle she could make out parts of 13 stars arranged in a familiar pattern. "My God," she whispered, causing the alien officers to look at her with confusion. Jake realized his tattoo was visible and quickly pulled his sleeve back down, but it was too late. The general's expression had changed completely, shifting from professional interest to something approaching reverence. "Your first fleet," she said quietly. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He had spent 15 years avoiding that recognition, burying his past under the identity of a simple mechanic. Now, with 2 words, General Hayes had stripped away all his carefully maintained anonymity. Commander Thax looked confused. "General, I don't understand. What is First Fleet?" "The Terran First Fleet was destroyed 30 years ago during the Sol Defense War," explained Colonel Davis, though his knowledge was clearly limited. "The records show no survivors from the final battle at Luna." General Hayes shook her head slowly, her eyes never leaving Jake's face. "The records were classified above your security level, Colonel. Only a handful of people in the entire galaxy know what really happened during the Luna operation." She stepped closer to Jake, speaking in a voice low enough that only he could hear. "How many ships made it out of Luna?" Jake's weathered face showed the pain of old memories. For a moment, the hangar around them seemed to fade as he traveled back 30 years to the most desperate battle in human history. 17 ships went in, he said quietly. 4 made it out. Most of those didn't make it much further. The general nodded grimly. She had read the classified reports years later as part of her advanced tactical training. The Battle of Luna had been a sacrifice operation, designed to buy time for civilian evacuations while the human fleet held an impossible line against overwhelming alien forces. "What was your position?" she asked. Jake looked around at the growing crowd of listeners. Alien workers had stopped their tasks to watch the conversation, sensing its importance even if they did not understand the details. "Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison," he said finally. "Engineering Division TFS Defiance." The name of the ship sent a chill through everyone who recognized it. The TFS Defiance had been the flagship of the Human Engineering Corps, famous for innovations that kept damaged ships fighting long past their expected survival time. General Hayes closed her eyes briefly, remembering the stories she had heard about the Defiance. The ship had stayed in the battle zone for 6 hours after taking critical damage, using jury-rigged repairs to maintain life support and weapons while evacuating crew from other destroyed vessels. "The Luna Gambit," she said, more to herself than to Jake. "You know about that?" Jake asked with surprise. "It's required reading at the War College. 18 hours of holding action against a fleet 5 times your size. The tactical analysis calls it the most successful impossible mission in military history." The alien officers were exchanging confused glances. None of them had heard of the Luna Gambit, or understood why the general was treating a maintenance worker with such respect. Commander Thex's curiosity finally overcame his confusion. "General, what exactly was this Luna Gambit?" General Hayes looked at the assembled aliens, realizing that most of them had no idea about the sacrifices that had made the current peace possible. The Sol Defense War had ended before many of them were born, and the human role in that conflict had been deliberately downplayed in official histories. "The Luna Gambit was a delaying action," she explained. "The human fleet was outnumbered and outgunned, but they needed to buy time for civilian evacuations. So they developed a strategy that was completely insane by conventional standards." She paused, looking at Jake with new understanding. Instead of retreating or trying to win an impossible battle, they turned their ships into mobile repair platforms. When one vessel took critical damage, the others would strip it for parts while still under fire. They kept a fighting force operational by cannibalizing their own fleet. The alien officers stared in amazement. Such tactics went against every principle of fleet organization they had been taught. Ships were supposed to retreat when damaged, not sacrifice themselves to keep others fighting. "The engineering challenges alone should have made it impossible," Colonel Davis added, beginning to understand the implications. "Performing complex repairs while under combat conditions, using parts from different ship classes, maintaining life support systems with improvised solutions. It worked because of people like Chief Morrison," General Hayes said, her respect clear in her voice. "Engineers who could look at a pile of damaged components and somehow turn them into working systems." Jake felt uncomfortable with the praise. "We just did what needed doing. Too many good people didn't make it home." The simple statement carried the weight of survivor's guilt that Jake had carried for 30 years. He had lived when better men and women had died, and no amount of recognition could change that fact. General Hayes understood the burden he carried. She had lost friends in the Rigel campaign and knew how survivor's guilt could drive people to seek anonymity rather than glory. "How did you end up here?" she asked gently. Jake looked around the hangar, taking in the mix of alien species working together to maintain the Federation fleet. "After the war ended, I needed something useful to do. Ships still need fixing, and I'm good at fixing them." "You've been here 15 years working night shifts avoiding attention," the general observed. "Seemed like the right thing to do. Peace is more important than old wars." But General Hayes was beginning to understand that Jake's presence at Starbase Omega was more significant than simple post-war employment. She pulled out her tablet and accessed the maintenance database, searching for patterns that she was now equipped to recognize. What she found amazed her even more than the frigate repairs. General Hayes spent the next 2 hours reviewing every maintenance record in the Starbase Omega database. What she discovered sent shockwaves through the Federation command structure within hours of her initial report. Jake Morrison had not simply been working as a mechanic for 15 years. He had been systematically upgrading the entire Federation fleet, one ship at a time, without anyone realizing what was happening. The data was overwhelming. Every vessel Jake had touched showed performance improvements that defied explanation using standard maintenance procedures. Fuel efficiency was up an average of 22% across all ship classes. Engine reliability had improved by 37%. Most remarkably, combat effectiveness ratings were 43% higher for ships that had received his attention. "This is impossible," Commander Thex said as he reviewed the numbers on his own tablet. "One maintenance worker cannot improve fleet performance across thousands of vessels." But the evidence was undeniable. Colonel Davis had run the analysis 3 times using different parameters, and the results remained consistent. Jake's quiet work had enhanced Federation military readiness far beyond what anyone had imagined possible. "He's not just fixing problems," General Hayes explained to the growing crowd of officers. "He's identifying potential failures before they occur and implementing preventive solutions. Every repair includes upgrades that won't show benefits for months or years." Jake listened to the discussion with growing discomfort. He had never intended for his work to attract attention. The improvements had simply been the natural result of doing jobs correctly, using techniques learned during the desperate years of the Sol Defense War. "I just fix what's broken," he said quietly. "If I see something that might break later, I fix that too." "But how do you identify future problems?" asked Dr. Vale, a crystalline being who served as the base's chief technical officer. "Our diagnostic systems use advanced predictive algorithms to forecast component failures." Jake shrugged. "Computers see what they're programmed to see. Sometimes you need to listen to how the machine sounds, feel how it vibrates, pay attention to things the sensors miss." The concept seemed alien to most of the Federation officers. Their training emphasized systematic analysis and computer-assisted diagnostics. The idea of using intuition and sensory perception to evaluate complex machinery was foreign to their technical philosophy. But General Hayes understood completely. During her military career, she had known pilots who could sense engine problems before instruments detected them, and gunners who could adjust for targeting errors by instinct rather than calculation. "It's about experience," she said. "The kind of deep understanding that only comes from working with machines under extreme conditions." Word of Jake's identity and abilities spread through Starbase Omega like wildfire. Human crew members who had barely noticed him for 15 years suddenly approached with something approaching reverence, but it was the reaction of the alien staff that surprised everyone. Commander Thex formally requested a private meeting with Jake, something that had never happened in 15 years of working together. When they met in the commander's office, the towering insectoid officer did something unprecedented. He bowed. "I owe you an apology, Chief Morrison," Thex said, using Jake's military rank for the first time. "I failed to recognize your true capabilities and did not utilize your skills effectively." Jake felt embarrassed by the formal gesture. "You don't need to apologize, Commander. You ran a good operation. I just did my part." "No," Thex replied firmly. "You did far more than your part. The performance improvements you have made to our fleet have saved countless lives. Ships that should have failed in combat continued fighting because of your work." The commander pulled up a classified report on his screen. 3 months ago, a Federation cruiser survived an ambush by raiders near the Vega system. The ship took massive damage but managed to escape because its emergency systems functioned beyond normal parameters. Jake remembered working on that cruiser's backup power grid. He had noticed that the emergency batteries were linked inefficiently and had rewired them to provide more reliable power during crisis situations. The captain's report credited Superior. "Designed for their survival," Thex continued. "Now I understand it was superior maintenance." Similar stories emerged throughout the day as officers reviewed their own experiences with ships that had performed unexpectedly well during difficult missions. Time and again, the enhanced performance could be traced back to Jake's quiet improvements during routine maintenance periods. But the most significant recognition came from an unexpected source. Admiral Kresh arrived at Starbase Omega that evening, traveling specifically to meet Jake Morrison. The ancient Altarian was a legend in his own right, the military leader who had commanded the alien forces during the Sol Defense War 30 years earlier. Admiral Kresh was old even by Altarian standards, his blue skin marked with the silver patterns that indicated a warrior of the highest rank. He walked with a slight limp from an injury sustained during the final battle at Luna, and his pale eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much war. When Kresh entered Hangar Bay 94, The entire facility fell silent. Alien workers stopped their tasks to watch the legendary admiral, while human crew members stood at respectful attention. Jake was working on another damaged ship when Admiral Kresh approached. The old warrior moved slowly, studying Jake's face as if trying to reconcile his memories with the man before him. "You are Chief Morrison," Kresh said, in heavily accented English. "Engineering Division, TFS Defiance." Jake straightened and faced his former enemy. 30 years had passed since they had tried to kill each other, but the recognition between them was immediate and profound. "Admiral Kresh," Jake replied with a respectful nod. "You're looking well, sir." The old Altarian smiled, a gesture that transformed his scarred features. "You cost my fleet 12 ships at Luna with engineering alone. Impossible repairs that kept your vessels fighting when they should have been space debris." A crowd had gathered to witness this extraordinary meeting between former enemies. Many of the younger staff members had never seen veterans from opposite sides of an old war treating each other with mutual respect. "Your people were fine warriors," Jake said simply. "They fought with honor." "As did yours," Kresh replied. "The Luna Gambit was brilliant and terrible. We had overwhelming advantages in numbers and technology, but you had something we could not match." "What was that, Admiral?" "Determination. The willingness to sacrifice everything for your principles." Kresh paused, his pale eyes distant with memory. "We came to conquer Earth, but you taught us about the cost of true resistance." The conversation between the two veterans continued for nearly an hour. They spoke of battles fought long ago, of friends lost on both sides, and of the peace that had grown from the ashes of that terrible war. "Your repairs at Luna were works of art," Admiral Kresh said, as their meeting drew to a close. "Beautiful and impossible. I studied them for years trying to understand how you kept fighting with ships that should have been dead." Jake smiled slightly. "Sometimes the best solutions come from not knowing something is impossible." "Indeed. And now you bring those same solutions to the Federation fleet. The galaxy is safer because of your quiet service." As Admiral Kresh prepared to leave, he performed a traditional Altarian warrior's salute, pressing his hands together and bowing deeply. "It has been an honor to meet you again, Chief Morrison. May you find the peace that war could not provide." Jake returned the salute in the same manner, a gesture of respect that surprised the alien observers. "Thank you, Admiral. Safe travels." After Kresh departed, Jake found himself surrounded by Federation officers who saw him with completely new eyes. The quiet mechanic had become a living legend, a bridge between the heroic past and the peaceful present. The news of Jake Morrison's true identity spread throughout the Federation within days. What started as a routine inspection report became a galaxy-wide revelation that changed how people viewed both the Sol Defense War and the quiet heroes working among them. Federation Command requested Jake's complete service record, but most of the files had been classified at levels that required special authorization to access. General Hayes used her security clearance to retrieve what information existed, and what she found confirmed her growing respect for the man who had been hiding in plain sight. Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison had not just been an engineer aboard the TFS Defiance. He had been the senior technical specialist responsible for the innovations that made the Luna Gambit possible. His jury-rigged solutions had kept human ships fighting for 18 critical hours, buying time for the civilian evacuations that saved millions of lives. The official records showed 43 separate innovations attributed to Jake during the final battle. Each one had solved a problem that should have been impossible to fix under combat conditions. Power systems that ran on backup energy for hours beyond their design limits. Life support systems that maintained atmospheric pressure despite hull breaches. Weapons that continued firing using components salvaged from destroyed ships. He essentially redesigned our entire fleet during the battle. Colonel Davis reported to General Hayes. Every major system was modified or improved under fire, but Jake's contributions had not ended with the war. The classified files revealed that his techniques had been studied and incorporated into standard Federation engineering practices. Many of the advanced systems used throughout the galaxy were based on solutions he had developed 30 years earlier. "We've been using his innovations without realizing it," General Hayes said with amazement. "Half the emergency procedures taught at the Academy originated from his work at Luna. The recognition that followed was unlike anything seen in Federation history. Jake Morrison was awarded the Galactic Order of Merit in a ceremony attended by representatives from every member world. The presentation took place in the same hangar where he had worked anonymously for 15 years. Commander Thex personally recommended Jake for the highest civilian honor the Federation could bestow. In his official statement, the insectoid officer wrote, "Chief Morrison has served the Federation with distinction for 15 years, improving our fleet's capabilities through quiet excellence and unwavering dedication to duty. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The human crew members at Starbase Omega organized their own ceremony, presenting Jake with a simple plaque that read, 'To the mechanic who kept us safe when we didn't even know we needed protecting.' Jake was deeply moved by the gesture. 'This means more to me than any official award,' he said, his voice thick with emotion. Knowing that the work mattered, that it helped keep people safe, that's what it was all about. The Federation offered Jake a commission as Chief of Engineering with a rank equivalent to Admiral. The position would have placed him in charge of technical development for the entire galactic fleet. With resources and authority beyond imagination, Jake politely declined. "I appreciate the offer," he told General Hayes during their private meeting, "but I've found my place. The work I do here is important and I'm good at it." General Hayes tried to convince him to reconsider. "Jake, you could revolutionize how we maintain and operate starships. Your insights could benefit the entire Federation." "My insights already benefit the Federation," Jake replied with a slight smile. "One ship at a time, one repair at a time. That's how real change happens." The general understood his reasoning even if she disagreed with his decision. Jake Morrison had found peace in honest work, away from the pressures and politics of high command. Forcing him into a position he did not want would have been a poor way to honor his service. Instead, the Federation created a new program based on Jake's example. Experienced engineers were embedded within maintenance crews throughout the fleet, tasked with identifying and implementing performance improvements during routine service operations. The Morrison Protocol, as it became known, revolutionized Federation maintenance practices. Ships began showing the same kinds of improvements that Jake had been making for years, extending service life and improving combat effectiveness across all classes of vessels. Jake continued working the night shift in Hangar Bay 94, but his role had changed dramatically. Young engineers from dozens of species requested transfers to his section, eager to learn from the legendary mechanic. What had once been a quiet workplace became an informal academy, where the next generation of technical specialists learned their craft. "The most important thing to remember," Jake told his students, "is that machines are tools, but the people who depend on them are what really matter. Every repair you make, every improvement you implement, it's about keeping someone safe." His teaching style was hands-on and practical. Instead of theoretical discussions, Jake showed his students how to listen to engine harmonics, how to feel vibrations that indicated developing problems, and how to trust their instincts when computer diagnostics missed critical issues. "Computers are very good at analyzing what they're designed to detect," he explained while working on a transport vessel's navigation system. "But they can't smell the ozone that means electrical components are overheating, and they can't feel the subtle changes in vibration that indicate bearing wear." The students, both human and alien, learned to appreciate the nuances of mechanical sympathy that Jake had mastered over decades of experience. They discovered that the most advanced diagnostic equipment was only as good as the person interpreting its results. One evening, as Jake finished his shift, he found General Hayes waiting by his locker. She had returned to Starbase Omega for a follow-up inspection and wanted to see how the Morrison Protocol was being implemented. "Any regrets about turning down the promotion?" she asked. Jake considered the question while changing out of his coveralls. Around them, the hangar hummed with the sounds of productive work as the night shift began their repairs. "No regrets," he said finally. "This is where I belong. These ships, these crews, they need someone who understands what it means to keep fighting when everything goes wrong." General Hayes nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind his words. Jake Morrison had found his purpose not in commanding fleets or designing new technologies, but in the quiet satisfaction of work done well. "The Federation is stronger because of people like you," she said. "The Federation is strong because of all the people who do their jobs without expecting recognition," Jake replied. "I was just lucky enough to get noticed." As General Hayes prepared to leave, she watched Jake prepare for another night of repairs. Around him, students from across the galaxy worked alongside experienced mechanics, learning the skills that would keep the Federation fleet operational for generations to come. The old warrior had found his final battlefield, and it was a place of peace where broken things were made whole again. In Hangar Bay 94, surrounded by the tools of his trade and the students who would carry on his legacy, Jake Morrison had achieved the greatest victory of his long career. He had turned war into peace, one repair at a time. The story of the mechanic who became a legend spread throughout the galaxy, inspiring a new understanding of how heroism could manifest in quiet service. But for Jake Morrison, the most important recognition was the knowledge that somewhere in space, Federation crews were flying ships that worked a little better, lasted a little longer, and brought their people home safely. That was worth more than any medal or rank. It was the true measure of a life well lived.